Hello, I'm David Greentree, and I've got some more exciting things to talk about today. Comes actually, not my own idea necessarily, but from a book my kids gave me to encourage me to get my Greek up to scratch again, which I've been trying to do. And it's called Devotions on the Greek New Testament. Now, don't get me wrong. God is so much cleverer, you might say infinitely wiser, but so much cleverer than people give him credit for. I haven't the slightest doubt that when he put the Bible together, he did it in such a way that it will achieve his purposes of leading people to faith in his son Jesus and then growing believers into the sort of full maturity of being like Jesus in their lives, that it'll achieve his purposes in pretty much any translation, and even pretty wonky translations. But it's also a fact at the same time that he fully used the original languages that he had it written in, and used sort of every bit of their capabilities and the figures of speech and even lovely little word plays. The Bible's full of lovely little word plays, which of course don't come in translation, so that it is still rather fun to read it in the original, and there are still things that sort of you miss in translation that sort of hit you and think, oh yeah. Well, this is one of those oh yeah things, but it was pointed out to me by this book, and it's about Joseph, as I said, and it comes in Matthew 1 verse 19. And okay, what's been happening at that time? Well, Mary has had a visit, as you know, from the Archangel Gabriel, who's said, hey, guess what, Mary, you're going to have a baby. And Mary might have been young, but she was not stupid. And she said, hold on, no, I'm not. I'm not having sex with anybody. To which Gabriel says, it's not going to be that sort of baby. This is going to be a miracle, no man involved. That's why the baby will be called the Son of God. And this baby you're going to have is the long-awaited Messiah. And Mary doesn't freak out, though she's probably only a little teenager. She doesn't freak out. She says, okay, I'm the Lord's servant. Let it be as you've said. Which is pretty brave. But after she's cast a lot in and said, yep, I'm in, the angel said, well, if you want a little proof of, that God can do things like this, go and visit your relative Elizabeth, because in her old age, she's now 6 months pregnant. The one that people said could never have babies, she's 6 months pregnant. And of course, Mary does that. She goes off and visits Elizabeth, and there's a gorgeous bit in Luke's Gospel of the two women, but that's another story. But getting back to this, okay, 3 months later, she comes back and, oh, guess what? Little tummy bump, and hey, guess what, fellas, I'm pregnant. Okay, switch over now to Joseph. Joseph was betrothed to Mary. Now, it was much stronger than our engagement, but they hadn't had the wedding ceremony yet, so they shouldn't have been doing any hanky-panky. But if she'd been doing it with anyone else, that was adultery. I mean, it was halfway toward marriage, and to end it was going to be sort of divorce. Well, what's Joseph to think? His lovely little Mary goes skipping off to the country for 3 months, comes back, oh, I'm pregnant. Well, he knew it wasn't his. Well, what was he to think? I mean, the only thing he could possibly think was, she's been cheating on me. Now, even in our day of very relaxed morals, we don't put up with someone cheating on you don't put up with your fiancé, not even your boyfriend or girlfriend, cheating on you. They're out. Well, obviously he wasn't going to marry a girl like that. But he actually had a stronger duty than saying, sorry, not marrying you, honey. Not with somebody else's baby. And yeah, he had a stronger obligation. Under the sort of strict rules of the Old Testament, he had to denounce her and say, hey, that's not my baby she's carrying. She's been committing adultery. Now, it's all right, she wasn't going to get stoned. They hadn't done that in generations. But certainly everyone was going to go, shock, horror, she has done a really wicked, bad thing. And, yeah, she was going to be socially so outcast. Yeah, just the whole family was probably going to be socially so outcast. But he had a duty to do that, and funnily enough, under the they were under sort of Roman law as well. Under Roman law, a husband who discovered his wife was committing adultery had a legal obligation to denounce her, and if he didn't, he was committing a crime as sort of an accomplice. So, the whole thing of that day was, okay, you've got to denounce her. She's done a really bad thing. She's a wicked woman. You've got to denounce her and let her take the consequences. But okay, come now to our verse, Matthew 1:19, and in the Greek it says, now they love participles, the ing ending words, more than English does, and often you've got to sort of change them into something else to translate them, but just leave it how it is. It says, Joseph was being righteous. Now I know some translations try and get other words in there, but the word is dikaios. And everywhere in the New Testament, it can mean things other than righteous, but everywhere the New Testament talks about righteous, it uses dikaios, and when it uses righteousness, it's dikaios's cousin, dikaiosune. So, okay, let's just take it as righteous for the moment. It says, Joseph was being righteous and not wanting to expose Mary to public disgrace. Okay, so at the same time as he was being righteous, he was not wanting to do what he should do. And what does he decide? Well, it says he makes up his mind that he is going to divorce her quietly so that she won't be, exposed to public disgrace. Now, we tend to skip over that and say, no, reel yourself back to that day and age. Okay, little Mary's betrothed to him. They're not married yet, but it's close enough, but there shouldn't have been any hanky-panky. She's pregnant, and he's not going to deny that it's his baby. You're not going to say it is, but he's not going to deny it. He's just going to divorce her. Okay, come on, what are people going to think? They're going to think this Joseph is the biggest louse that ever lived. He seduces the little girl, he's, betrothed to her, but he gets her into bed, gets her pregnant, and then he kicks her out. Well, poor Mary. Okay, who's going to be the villain? Joseph. In actual fact, what Joseph's decided to do was that all the, shame, all the social, rejection that, as far as he could see, Mary deserved, because as far as he could see, she'd done something really, really bad, he was going to take on himself. He was going to let everyone think he was the bad guy. And you think, oh, wow, how do we miss that bit? This Joseph is something else. But it goes a little bit further than that. A bit later on in Matthew, Jesus says to his disciples, this is 30 years later, right? Jesus says to his disciples, you've got to be more righteous than the Pharisees if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven. And they'll go, how is such a thing possible? These Pharisees, they are so righteous they practically crinkle when they walk. But then you find a little bit later Jesus saying things to the Pharisees like, hey, you fellas ought to learn what this Bible meant when it says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. That Jesus picks holes in them, and he's not telling the disciples that they should go further than the Pharisees in the Pharisaic way of righteousness, the human idea of righteousness, but that they need to expand it, that there is something missing in the Pharisees' righteousness. And of course, 2-3 years roll past, and what do we find? Jesus going to the cross in our place. Jesus allowing himself to be crucified, and Jesus, who was totally innocent, taking not just the shame of our evil and our wrongdoing, but the punishment as well, taking everything that we deserved, and we suddenly think, oh, all that happened because God was not willing to punish us as our sins really did deserve. With Joseph, it was only as he thought Mary deserved. But with us, now we really were rebels, we really are sinners. But God was not willing to punish us as we deserve, so he sent his own son as a human being to die in our place, to take our shame, our punishment on him. And then you think back to Joseph and think, oh, yeah, that's what it means in God's terms, not human idea. In God's ideas, what it means to be righteous can't be separated from mercy and compassion. That God had to punish sin, but he had mercy and compassion on us, and his righteousness did not separate the necessity to punish sin from the mercy and compassion toward us. So he took that punishment himself in his own dear son. And then you go back to Joseph and think, and that's exactly what, I mean, all right, in Joseph's world, it was going to be a pretty big punishment he was going to take on behalf of Mary. But, minuscule, I know, compared to Jesus. But okay, for Joseph it was going to be a big thing. This was going to ruin his life. That Joseph's going to do this to Mary, even though he believed she cheated on him and she'd done something which was sort of incomprehensibly for them in those days wicked. He was going to take her punishment. And you suddenly think, And then you think, okay, God waited till after that to tell Joe it was all right. God had let Joseph go through this, it must have been mental agony, make this decision. And once Joseph had showed that he had the same righteousness that God had, that he was prepared to do in his own little way what Jesus was going to do, then God put him out of his misery. Then God sent an angel in a dream to say, Joseph, it's all right, take Mary home as your wife. She hasn't been cheating on you. This really is a miracle. She has been chosen to be the mother of the long-awaited Messiah, the Son of God. And so you are going to be the stepfather of the Messiah. And you look at it and you think, yeah. And he had just passed a huge test. He had just shown that he really was worthy to be the stepfather of Jesus, our Saviour.